The night Seraphine left, it was raining so hard that the sound of the gate closing behind her was swallowed completely by the storm. She did not look back. She had made herself a promise in the last few seconds before the guards turned away from her. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of watching her break. So she walked forward into the dark, with wet hair clinging to her face and no shoes on her feet, and she kept walking until the lights of Ironmount Hold disappeared behind the hills. She was 22 years old. She had done nothing wrong, and she carried a secret that no one in that great stone fortress knew. She was going to be a mother. The charge against her had been treason. Someone had placed a forged letter in her name, a letter that supposedly handed Pack military routes to a rival faction called the Velthorn Syndicate. A witness had stood before the council and sworn under oath that he had seen her make the exchange. The evidence was presented cleanly, efficiently, as if it had been prepared well in advance, because it had been. King Kalen Dreven, Alpha of Ironmount, had read the decree of exile himself. He had stood at the front of the great hall in his dark coat, with the firelight on his face, and his voice had been perfectly steady. Seraphine had tried to speak. She had raised her hand and opened her mouth, and begun the word, please. And Kalen had lifted one hand, just slightly, in a gesture that meant enough. Then he had turned away from her. That single turn was the thing she replayed the most in the years that followed. Not the verdict, not the walk to the gate, just that small, final turn of his shoulders, and the way he did not look back either. She survived the first month through sheer stubbornness. She crossed 3 territories on foot, sleeping under trees, eating what she could find, moving during the day and resting when her body demanded it. By the time she collapsed at the edge of the Free Hollows, a neutral zone where pack law did not reach, she was exhausted, in a way that went deeper than her bones. An old woman named Marin found her on the road and brought her inside without asking a single question. Marin had been a healer for 50 years. She had seen women arrive on her doorstep in every possible condition, and she understood that the most important thing you could give a person in that state was warmth, food, and silence. So that is what she gave. 6 months later, Seraphine gave birth in a small stone cottage, while rain fell outside in almost exactly the same way it had on the night she was exiled. She noticed this and decided it meant nothing, because she had stopped believing in signs. 2 girls, twins. She named the first one Lyra, because she had always loved that name and had never told anyone. She named the second one Kayla, and she sat with that name on her tongue for a long time before she spoke it aloud, because it was almost the name of the man she was trying to forget, changed just enough to belong to someone far more deserving. The girls were small and loud and perfect. Seraphine looked at them and felt something rearrange itself permanently inside her chest. She had come to the Free Hollows with nothing. Over the next 6 years, she built something remarkable from that nothing. She studied under Marin until she surpassed her teacher. She learned pack law and territorial codes not because she planned to use them against anyone, but because she refused to ever again be caught without the knowledge to protect herself. She treated the sick, the injured, and the forgotten. Lone wolves, half-bloods, exiles from a dozen different packs who had ended up in the neutral zone with nowhere else to go. People began to call her the Silver Warden. It was an informal title, given by those who had no official power to give titles, which somehow made it mean more. She was known across 7 territories as a healer who could not be bought, could not be threatened, and would treat anyone who came to her door, regardless of who they were or where they had come from. She built a coalition of 20 healers who worked under her guidance. She established agreements with 5 different neutral councils. She created something that was not quite a pack and not quite a business. It was more like a quiet kind of power, the kind that grows slowly and holds firmly and does not need to announce itself. Through all of this, her daughters grew beside her. Lyra was gentle and observant. She absorbed her mother's healing knowledge the way dry ground absorbs rain, quickly, completely, with no visible seams. She was the kind of child who noticed when someone in a room was sad and went quietly to sit beside them without being asked. Kayla was something else entirely. From the time she was very small, grown wolves stepped back when she walked past them, not out of politeness, out of instinct. She had an authority in her presence that most alphas spent decades developing, and she had been born with it. She was direct in the way that people sometimes call rude, until they realize they are simply not used to honesty. She read people instantly and accurately, and had no patience for pretending not to. Seraphine never spoke to them about their father. If they asked, and occasionally they did, in the careful testing way that children ask questions they are not sure they want answered, she said only that he was a man who had made a choice, and that they were the consequence he would never deserve to know. She said it without bitterness, or at least she worked very hard to say it that way. When the girls were 6 years old, a letter arrived. It came from Elder Tessely, a woman who had sat on Ironmount's council for 30 years, and who had been the single dissenting voice on the night of Seraphine's exile. The letter was written in a shaking hand on plain paper, and it said very little. The witness had confessed. The letter had been forged. The entire charge had been constructed by an agent of the Velthorn Syndicate who had wanted Seraphine removed from neutral territory politics because her influence there was becoming inconvenient for them. The council knew now. Kalen did not yet know, because no one had been willing to be the person to tell him, and Tessely was dying. The healers had given her perhaps 3 months, perhaps less. If Seraphine wanted the truth officially placed on record before the last witness to the original proceedings was gone, she needed to come back. Seraphine read the letter 3 times. Then she burned it. She sat at her kitchen table for 1 full hour. She could hear her daughters in the other room, arguing pleasantly about something that did not matter. Outside, the evening was quiet and ordinary and entirely hers. Then she got up and began to pack. She was not going back for Kalen. She understood this clearly and held it firmly in her mind, because it mattered. She was going back because her daughters were 6 years old and growing, and one day they would be old enough to know their full story, and she would not allow that story to include the word traitor next to her name. She was going back because the truth existed and was documented and needed only to be spoken aloud by the right person in the right room before that person was gone. She told the girls they were taking a journey. Lyra asked if they would be gone long. Seraphine said she wasn't sure. Hila stood in the doorway of her bedroom with her small arms crossed and studied her mother's face and said, "Is our father there?" Seraphine did not answer immediately. After a moment she said, "Possibly." Keela nodded once, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected, and went back to packing her bag. They arrived at the outer edge of Ironmount territory on a gray morning, all 3 of them in dark traveling coats, Seraphine with a healer's satchel on one shoulder, and 7 years of quiet, accumulated strength in her posture. She did not send word ahead. She did not request entry. She simply arrived, which was a statement in itself. A market vendor recognized her first, and went completely still. Then the word moved through the village, the way fire moves through dry grass. And by the time they reached the inner gates, there was a crowd gathering on both sides of the road. The gates opened before she had to ask. She was brought to the council hall. Elder Tessely was already there, small and white-haired, and sitting very straight in a chair by the fire, despite everything her body was doing to her. The old woman looked at Seraphine, and then looked at the twins, and her eyes filled with tears that she did not allow to fall. The formal legal review was precise and thorough. Seraphine presented herself under the neutral healer's right of testimony, a protection under Interpack law that existed precisely for situations like this one. Tessely gave her full account of the original proceedings, the pressure on the council, the witness who had since fled to another territory and left a written confession behind, the forged letter, and the Velthorn agent behind it. Every piece of it entered the official record. The ruling came quickly. Seraphine's exile was declared unlawful. The treason charge was removed from all records. Her standing was formally restored. She was sitting in the council hall, watching her daughters eat bread rolls on a bench by the window, when the far doors opened and Kalen walked in. He was exactly as she remembered, and everything about him was different. The same broad shoulders, the same dark hair, the same quality of stillness that very powerful men develop when they have learned to move carefully through rooms. But he was 34 now, and there were lines on his face that had not been there before, and the way he held himself had a weight to it that looked less like confidence and more like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. He stopped when he saw her. Then his eyes moved, as they naturally would, because 2 6-year-old girls sitting on a bench eating bread are not easy to miss, and he saw them. Kayla was already looking at him. She had been watching the door for several minutes, because she always noticed when something important was about to happen. She looked at him the way she looked at most things, directly, thoroughly, without embarrassment. Then she tilted her head slightly to one side. Keelan looked at Seraphine. His voice, when it came, was working hard to stay level. "How old are they?" "6, she said. 7 years ago you had me removed from this territory before I had the chance to tell you I was pregnant. I did not come back. Now I have come back for a legal matter that is now concluded." She held his gaze steadily. "Anything beyond that is a different conversation for a different time." The council members, all of whom had remained in the room, became suddenly very interested in the documents on the table in front of them. The official part of the proceedings ended. People filed out. Elder Tessely stayed long enough to look at Kaylin with the plain, exhausted honesty of someone who had run out of time for anything less than the truth. "I failed her," she said, "and I failed you. I should have been louder at the time." Then she left as well. Kaylin walked toward the girls. He was careful about it, the way a person is careful when they are approaching something they have no right to rush. He stopped a few feet away and crouched down so that he was at their level. "Hello," he said. "Hello," said Lyra politely. Kayla looked at him for a moment. "You look like me," she said. There was a silence in the room that felt like it occupied more space than silence usually does. "I think," Kaylin said, very carefully, "that you look like yourself." Kayla considered this with the expression of someone evaluating a legal argument. "That's diplomatic," she said. Several things crossed Kaylin's face in quick succession. He stood. He faced Seraphine. And then, without any announcement, without any performance, he lowered himself to his knees on the stone floor of the council hall. He did not kneel before Seraphine. He knelt before his daughters. "I did not know you existed," he said, and his voice was honest in the way that voices are when a person has stopped trying to manage how they sound. "I know that is not an excuse for the years that are already gone. But it is the thing I most need you to understand, that if I had known, I would not have let a single day pass the way these days have passed." He paused. "I owe your mother more than I have the words for right now. But I owe you something simpler. I owe you the truth. You had a father who did not know you. That is the worst failure of my life, even though I did not know I was failing." Lyra looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were exactly like her mother's, clear and careful, and giving nothing away until they were ready. "Are you going to try to make it right?" she asked. "If your mother allows it," he said, "and if you do." Kayla looked at Seraphine. It was a look that said, "Your move." Seraphine was quiet. She looked at the man kneeling on the floor of the hall where he had once read a decree that took everything from her. She thought about the 7 years of rain and road and rebuilding. She thought about her coalition, her healers, her daughters who had never learned to be small. She thought about how she had come here today for herself and for them, and not for him, and how that distinction still mattered, and would keep mattering. She was not going to forgive him today. She understood that clearly. Forgiveness was not a gate you walked through once. It was a road, and it was long, and she had not yet decided whether she would walk it. But her daughters were looking at her, and they deserved a chance at something she had decided for herself that she did not need. "Stand up," she said. "You can carry the guilt on your feet the same as on your knees. Right now, these girls need a proper meal, and so do I. And this floor is cold." Kaylin stood. Something in his face settled, not into relief exactly, but into the particular expression of a man who has been given a beginning and knows it is all he has earned. Someone brought food. A small room off the hall had been quietly prepared. A table, chairs, roast meat, bread, warm broth. The 4 of them sat down together for the first time. Kayla immediately disputed the correct way to eat a bread roll. She was right. Kaylin conceded without argument. Lyra watched this exchange and then, carefully, as if she were placing a very small and fragile thing down on a table, gave him the beginnings of a smile. Seraphine watched her daughters. She drank her broth. She let the moment exist without trying to define it. Outside, the sky over Ironmount was the pale, washed-out gray of a day that has survived its own storm. The kind of light that does not promise anything, but does not close anything off either. The kind of light that simply continues, which, on some days, is the only thing that matters.